Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about the 2022 horror thriller, Smile. Dr. Rose Cotter, a therapist, witnesses a bizarre and traumatic incident involving a patient named Laura Weaver. Laura claims to be haunted by an entity that appears as smiling people that has foretold her death. While Rose and Laura are having a conversation, one thing leads to another, and Rose inevitably has to call for an emergency, suicide notion as Laura is committing suicide in a horrifying manner, taking a piece of glass from a broken vase and sketching a smile across her face. After Laura commits suicide in a horrifying manner, Rose begins to experience increasingly disturbing and daunting experiences that lead her to believe that she's being targeted by the same entity. Now, whenever Smile came out, I thought it was actually a pretty unique movie experience, something that, entities that have been done before, but not in the manner that made me feel quite as tense while watching a movie. This is probably the latest modern movie to actually put me on edge while I was watching it. Rose in this movie is played by Susie Bacon, and she does a really good job at keeping you guessing at what's going to happen to her next. She also performs the trauma and the emotion of her mother's suicide, along with everything else that she's having traumatic events about, really well. It really touches base on a lot of like really serious notes through this movie between trauma, suicide, and like really bad human emotion. Because the movie deals with, suicidal tendencies as well as like human traumatic moments because the entity itself feeds off of past trauma and human emotion. As the entity's influence intensifies, Rose's life spirals into chaos. She encounters bizarre occurrences such as people around her suddenly smiling in an unsettling manner, foreshadowing the impending doom upon her life. This one kind of touched base on me, like the thematic themes between the two movies, but it touched base on me with It Follows. It has a lot of similarities for the entity itself being able to take over somebody that you know or somebody you may not know and follow you. This one kind of deals with that in the same manner, as which it would take over somebody she is close to or her own personal well-being or somebody at random and just make that person smile at her uncontrollably. And as Rosa's psychological well-being becomes intact, her loved ones become increasingly concerned as she isolates herself and exhibits erratic behavior. The entity itself begins to have Rose pushing her family away as it dives deeper into her mental well-being. This inevitably begins to affect Rose's love life with her husband as she's pushing him away because she feels like she can't trust him as he believes that she is crazy. This also starts to affect her close relationship with her sister as she goes to her son's birthday party and completely dismantles the whole entire party. Rose's ex-boyfriend, as Joel, is also played by Kyle Gallner, who's starting to make a really good name for himself in the horror community, playing in Smile, Smile 2, and now Strange Darling. Mark that down. All three movies are really good movies. But he plays a detective in this movie who's investigating a series of suicides that are linked to the entity itself. And lastly, this starts to affect Rose's job as she starts to see the entity as her patients, driving her away from her work as she cannot sleep and she begins to see things at her job site. In order to combat the entity's grip, Rove delves into her troubled past, confronting her mother's suicide and lingering trauma caused by it. She then seeks the help of a mysterious man named Robert Talley, the only known survivor of the entity's curse. Robert reveals that the entity feeds on fear and trauma, spreading its influence throughout the horrifying chain reaction. So we now know that the entity is feeding off the past trauma of her mother's suicide. As the entity grows more menacing, Rose must find a way to break the cycle and save herself. She faces a series of terrifying encounters, culminating in a climactic confrontation with the entity itself. This leads Rose to believe she must confront her past trauma with her mother's suicide and her deepest fears and make a choice that will determine her fate and the fate of those around her. There's a really awesome plot twist at the end of this movie that I won't ruin for you that keeps you going and keeps you on your toes. But let's just say it leaves you on a cliffhanger to the newest movie that came out in theaters a few weeks ago, Smile 2. Now, I truly just enjoyed the overall experience I had with this movie. Like I stated earlier in the video, this is one of the more modern movies that kept me on edge most of the movie. It had really effective jump scares, it had really effective acting, had super effective like dark and eerie moments that kept you guessing, and the presence of the entity itself really hits home. And if you haven't seen Smile, I definitely recommend you go check it out. For me, this is going to turn into a modern cult classic. I bet it follows the same path and roots as It Follows. A lot of people kind of touch base on It Follows whenever they compare it to this movie, but I think both have their own genuine nuances back and forth, but I think both really stand out in ways that have things that haven't been done before in the horror genre. And inevitably, if you're a horror fan, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for something new, right? You're looking for something that hasn't been done before, something that carries on the legacy of past films. And I think that Smile really does a good job of that. All right, guys, that'll do it for this one for me. I appreciate everything you guys do. Go check out my TikTok. There's some different stuff on there that I don't put up on this channel. I really want to start touching more base on a lot of different things on the channel. I got some things up my sleeve here that I plan on bringing to the channel in the near future. But I did just create my first skit, my little 30-second, horror film of a doppelganger myself. Check that out. It's in the shorts description below, as well as on my TikTok channel. I would greatly appreciate that, y'all. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Check under your beds, and stay safe out there.